Welcome to the 100th episode of Woman Being. Yay!
Woo-hoo!
We are all so excited and so proud of all the work that's been done. We're also all wearing black because we're mourning the end of our third season.
Apparently.
Sad face. This was totally unplanned, but I'm really excited to introduce our guest today. Her name is Kelly Lamb. We're adding a third Kelly to the mix today.
Wow, guys.
Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much.
And I'm also joined by the wonderful Kellyanne and the amazing Emma Williams today. My name's Kelly as well. Good luck keeping us sorted in your mind. It helps, if you're watching a video version of this podcast, that might help. But otherwise, best of luck to you.
Which you can watch on YouTube
on
or Spotify.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, plug there. Anyways, we'll be diving right in just a minute. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Kelly Lamb, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it like being a woman, kicking ass in your 30s and taking up space?
Fantastic question. You know what I would say, if I'm really honest, which is one of my core values, it ebbs and flows. I think sometimes life is beautiful and I feel so encouraged and I'm completely on it in all of the things I do. And then there are days that are so tough and you think, why am I doing this? And you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So I am doing that, putting one foot in front of the other and pursuing all of the things that I love, at least trying to. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Like anytime you're doing something hard, or something amazing that's worthwhile, it's like, oh, this is really hard, which is like, I feel like in our culture in general, we get wrapped up in the shiny, the pretty, what looks good, what's glamorous. And I'm like, if you're doing something amazing, you're most likely in the trenches and haven't had enough sleep and are probably strung out on some caffeine and your house is probably messy and you need to do some laundry, but also you're doing something. I'm
Absolutely.
like, such a wild ride.
Yeah. Well said. Well put. So, and tell us a little bit more about some of the things you love. Like you work as a director in
land
regenerative farming. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
And you do a bunch of other stuff. Tell us more.
Yeah,
and you have a podcast.
So I lead a team. The company is called Fifth World. We are in land regeneration. And I lead a consulting team and training, helping people restore their land. So that is my full-time job. And I've had a background in farming. To get through university, I worked on a cherry farm. And then out of university, I worked in the tomato industry and in the greenhouse industry. So life is sometimes full circle, that you come back to these things that you have been in before. And when the land calls you back, you ought to listen, is where I'm currently at. So
that's beautiful.
That just made me cry. I'm like, oh my God.
Because I think it does call you back. I think for those of us who have had experience on land and working with it, and then you try, I tried to get away from it because of how hard it was, but it called me back. So that's my full-time job. I love it. It's such an incredible era to be talking about land. And then it's different than the sustainability climate crisis conversation because we're being very proactive and basically saying, if you work with the land, it is just, the outcome is so beautiful. So I get to talk about soil and it's just an incredible space to be in. Then I started a nonprofit in Vancouver called Hello Yello. And it's basically geared to help people have spontaneous conversations to make Vancouver friendlier. So that is a side, people call them side hustles. It's much more than that, running a volunteer team, but it's tons of fun. Really great outlet for team and community and friendship. And then where my probably deepest passion lies is in my podcast called Bold, in which I get to talk about stories of women and the challenges they face.
Available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Anywhere you want to listen to your podcast.
Cool.
Can I ask, Kelly, what actually inspired you to start Bold? Why Bold?
Why Bold? Great question. I hosted a podcast last year. I loved it. I've had basically 3 other stop and start experiences, about to launch my another podcast, but basically got to this one and wanted to do something, it's the first thing that's like for me. Like, this is about what I'm passionate about. It's not about somebody else's like goals or dreams or story or narrative. It's like, this one's mine. And then I think that I wanted to talk about women's strength without hitting that right on the nose. So I didn't want to be like women in leadership or like powerful women, because I think some of those podcasts can be like quite cheesy, but wanting to get a kind of broader topic that I could press into. And so I went with bold.
That's amazing. And all of you can check out her podcast, like I said, again, on anywhere you can find podcast platforms. I'd also love to hear a little bit more because you have a little bit of a background in where you were seeking ordination.
Yes.
And I would love to hear, what was that like as a woman and what led you down a very different path now?
As a woman seeking ordination, I mean, how honest should we get here? We're
that
is up to you. This is woman being where no topic is off topic.
We've all been through the ringer, I think, in that realm. So like
So as a woman facing or looking to be ordained, it was quite honestly terrible. I was warned that more than 50% of men in the priesthood didn't respect women seeking priesthood. And I took that more as a like, hey, friendly warning, like, just so you know, you probably won't be very popular. It's going to be quite challenging. And I, as an Enneagram 8, took that as like, okay. And
you're like, bring it on.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think because of my background, which was in farming, which is like male dominant. And then I worked in a university context, which was male dominant. I was like, yeah, so, male dominant environments, been there before. I know what it feels like to be the only woman around a table. I wasn't totally petrified by that. I had no idea how entrenched people really don't want women around priesthood. Like, it is so deeply entrenched, and then to them so theological. And so it very quickly was, I would call it like a passive war zone, that it wasn't explicit. It wasn't like, hey, we're not ordaining women, turn around, go away. It was this more like passive interaction where you knew it wasn't favorable and you knew they wished you would just disappear. So for 3 years, it was this kind of back and forth process of checking all the boxes, and then those boxes would change. And so you found yourself kind of just like lost in a process that was different than all your male colleagues. So really, really terrible experience. And I think what led me down a different path was basically me acknowledging I don't want to fight. I don't want to like press into a space where people believe you should not be. And basically realizing like the church is in a really negative era, and this is not how I want to spend all of my energy, because I have a lot of it. And so I had to basically like reduce myself to keep being in this arena. And basically was like, I know I can't be here. I'm going to die. Not literally going to die, but I'm going to suffocate, and I'm going to like melt into a different person. And I didn't want to do that. So I actually backed out. I was like, guys, I know you're not ordaining women. I know this is not going anywhere. I know you're ignoring me. I know you've changed the rules for me. Basically, I won't tolerate this anymore. See ya. Bye.
Wow. Passive war zone, I feel like, is such a good word for that, where no one will sit you down and say, we don't believe women should be priests, therefore we will not do this. But it's like the jumping through hoops. And
totally.
Have you really considered God's calling here? And we should really, make sure that you're set up for success here. And you're like building this extreme resume.
Totally. Or the negativity that is actually like a priest basically said to me, we've had other women think they wanted to be priests, but they heard wrong. So we recommend you like going back and praying harder, and most likely you'll hear you don't want to be one either.
Right. Oh, good.
Okay.
Dang. And how many men do you think that they say that to?
None. They're like consistently hiring, like, join the priesthood. Yeah. We need more priests, Yeah.
Oh.
The servants are few. Like, it's like,
wow.
But if you like look at a different gender, there's actually like a ton of women that would be amazing and capable, but you just won't hire them.
Yeah. Well, and women outnumber men in the church 2 to 1.
Exactly.
Pretty much consistently across the board.
Right. And so when you like look around and you go, I mean, this just happened in the Southern Baptist movement, which I don't want to get into today, but they're basically like kicking the church or the women out of their roles just this last week, and you go like, what a bad move. Like that is such a, as far as like being relevant, which I know a lot of churches don't care about, but like really, you're going to deny women? Like that's the move you're going to make in 2023?
Yeah. Especially because I've seen nothing but just faithfulness and extreme desire to be present in the church from women, you know?
Definitely.
Like you meet all these people who just really, really care and are very, very intentional and deeply devoted to their faith and to serving God, and they just run into walls, and it's really painful.
Yeah, it's so hard to watch.
Yeah, it's so sad. I'm curious if I could poke a little bit.
Yeah.
What is some of the theology that you heard? Like, I'm always curious because I'm like, I've heard some of the rhetoric of like meet bad theology with better theology. And I'm like, we can't do that if we don't identify the bad theology.
I mean, massive debates that have been going on since the beginning of the church, in my opinion. But like Timothy, a lot of people quoted a lot of Timothy as like what the church and the family should look like. Obviously, women ought to be silent. You know, can't teach in certain contexts. That would be a large one. I think the kind of apostolic succession via men only throughout history is another big one. Or you have to like look like Christ, obviously. So then you need to be a male in order to look like Christ.
Oh, they mean literally
literally like, yes.
Literally what's between your legs needs to
100%.
Got it. Cool. Got it.
Yeah. So you actually have to like be an image of Christ to model his ministry. Everything. And then there's a lot on the like anti-woman side as well, right?
Sure.
So massive theological debates. I would just point people to Mary Magdalene quite quickly and say like the first apostle, which men tried to undermine by saying that she was demon possessed and a prostitute, and like wrote a different narrative for hundreds of thousands of years. So
they would never say the same about Paul, but whatever.
No, they certainly would not.
I'm also curious if looking like Jesus means white Jesus or actual
Definitely
Jesus.
white Jesus.
Okay, got it. Good.
Yeah, definitely white Jesus.
Yeah, good.
So a fictional character.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we get the image of elder as well, right? Like white male with a family where all the kids follow God, like straight out of Timothy. So like, interesting. I mean, it's incredibly one-sided in my opinion.
And it's pretty different from my understanding of just historically, like the earlier church had tons of women in leadership. And you see Paul speaking to women in leadership. You see like post-Bible, like early church women who were leading the churches back then. And then I think we don't need to go into a whole history lesson, but as the church became, you know, the Roman Catholic Church and a source of power, it became also more patriarchal, which is infuriating.
The film industry is very similar. It started out very woman-led. There's lots of female directors and artists and writers, and then it started to make money.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it became very patriarchal.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Kelly, could you tell us a little bit about like how you moved forward from this? Like you chose yourself, right? In choosing to pursue what you wanted. And then when it wasn't working out, I would argue you chose yourself again. That led you in a different path. How did you come to terms with that? Like, how did you pivot? Like, did you feel whiplash? Like, tell me everything. I want to know.
I would say how I move forward probably would mirror what it feels like to go through death, quite honestly. There were so many different stages of grief and anger and like all that whole kind of, you know, a season of bitterness. There was everything because it was this like amazingly like purposeful, one would say, calling that you got discriminated from. And that I had never really faced that so dramatically. And so I think I had to basically like really accept this is what is, and then accept that actually and not to sound overly dramatic, but it's a forever wound. It is something that has like hurt so dramatically and has shaped the way I like can't really listen to male pastors preach still.
Yeah.
4 years later, I'm like, oh my goodness, really? Shut up.
Yeah.
Like all the time. But acknowledging actually this is my forever wound and going, this has shaped who I am. This has shaped what it feels like to be a woman. This has shaped what it feels like to be somebody who tries to go to church. So I just think that moving forward, it was this kind of lesson in acknowledgement and then trying to basically reconstruct maybe part of like where we get our purpose from. So I think often when you're a part of ministry, there's like a lot of purpose boxes that get checked by getting to be a part of like church and preaching and all of these things that definitely Christianity says like you're significant from, you get rewarded for. And so I think I had to like rework what has purpose, where I get my like significance from, and basically like choose a completely different path that I actually think is more beautiful. Like I can look back now and not to be like toxically positive, but to be like, actually, what a gift that I got spared from that, because I probably would have like imploded and probably exploded a few environments out of just like sheer frustration. But had to basically like rewrite a lot of where I derive my purpose from.
You had so many good points. So I feel like I've talked a lot about like my deconstruction process being like the stages of grief. And in the stages of grief, I'm still angry and I'm not rushing that. And very similarly, I can't listen to worship music still without crying.
Interesting.
It's like, it's too much for me. And so I'm curious, when you say forever wound, how do you manage that? And like advocate for yourself in that? Because I feel like that applies to so many other areas of life. And then also, how did you reconstruct purpose? Because I'm out here struggling to reconstruct purpose and how that all works within faith or even outside of faith. Like, yeah, I think as a human, I'm just trying to make sense of everything. And I'm like, give me your wisdom.
2 packed questions. The forever wound one. I think the forever wound, and I think we all have many of them. Like I would have some with certain like family things I've been through. I would have some church-based forever wounds. I would probably say I have like a loneliness forever wound. Having been single in the church context for like 10 plus years. I think it's a matter of going like, this is the thing that is the like trigger point of basically all of my like fear mechanisms and all of my anger mechanisms. And is the thing that causes me this, like, I'll like wake up like so sad and I'll be like, oh, this is the family one today. And acknowledging it. And then I think it's being okay with it. I think the world is like so often wanting us to move on from these things. And like, therapy I think is great. I think sometimes it like undermines the need to just be like, this is the thing I carry with me. And the thing that will shape me, but I'm not like not overly, sometimes still angry for sure, but not like overly angry. And it's not necessarily like unhealthy and like an inability to like face the rest of life, but is the like the thing that shapes the decisions I make and the way I interact. I then also think I really think it's a source of purpose, to answer your second one. Like out of that forever wound comes this thing you want to like help other people with. And so like part of Bold is birthed out of this massive feeling of like, I don't belong, one, loneliness, I've been discriminated against, like where women fit. And so out of this wound, I think is birthed this like beautiful opportunity to come alongside other people. Even for me, some of my forever wounds are family based, and I've gone about life with like friends are family, and I've adopted a brother, and I have so many sisters and like nieces and nephews that aren't related by blood. I'm out of this kind of deeper wound of what family means. And so I actually think it's this like extraordinary invitation to purpose in a way that I think is like a little bit more mystical, a lot more painful, and doesn't get you the like accolades on social media. It's not that type of purpose. It's like a very deep internal one. So I actually think me reconstructing purpose is actually going like, this is my forever wound, and it's like never, ever, ever going away. And if I try to make it go away, I'm actually like not even myself anymore. And I think part of the negativity around the evangelical church and where like I've had to deconstruct is this like inability to express the brokenness of life. that were like broken. And I don't mean like came out of the womb broken and dark and evil. That's like another debate, maybe for another time. But like life is hard and complex, and most of us aren't living our like plan A, and it's sad. And are we okay with that? Hopefully that's not too depressing for your 100th episode.
Oh my God, no. I think it's so good and so real, because it's like, sure, you can have this wound as you describe it, but you still have a scar, right? That will always be remembered. It's a part of you. It's a part of your story. It's part of your experience. So like, why not take that and claim it? Yeah. And like, for lack of a better words, like own it, which I kind of hate that, but whatever. Don't have a better word, and just move forward, because you're right. Like everyone's trying to be healed, right? Everyone's trying to strive for their higher self, but at some level you're human and worthy as you are right now. So are you going to deny that yourself, that need, essentially? It's like, oh, I didn't get this. It created a space for need in my life. I have the opportunity to fill it. So in a way, it's just your own, it's self-advocacy in its purest form.
Yeah, well said.
Oh my God, thank you.
So Kelly, I'm curious, like as I feel like we've danced around the topic of, patriarchy and the fact that that is obviously steeped into the church, like we discussed. But now that you are a few years outside of this career path towards ordination, are there ways that you've seen patriarchy that you experienced in the church, like now mirrored in, I don't know, quote unquote, real life, if you want to call it that?
Yes, definitely mirrored. And then I would say exaggerated. I think there's this massive, I think as the like left becomes more left, the right fights back. And so I've seen in like corporate worlds, in social media, the like level of patriarchy and then in their misogyny is like completely heightened in a way that I feel like we've gone back. I mean, again, back to the Southern Baptist movement, and so sorry for all of you, but like we just stepped back 100 years as far as the like role of patriarchy in the church. I think the same thing is being modeled in everyday life. And then I think in family life as well, what's shocking, and this is from a book I read, so quoting somebody else, it's called Rage Becomes Her. She's basically saying millennials in heterosexual marriages actually have the most gender normed responsibilities in the household than any other generation currently alive. Wow. Which is shocking to me. Like that is, I was like, when I read it, I had to read it like 8 times. I was like, really? But then I look around at my friends and I go, yeah, absolutely. We've basically gone back to these gender norms of like women stay home and men work hard. In North America, I think it's probably, and I know I have friends in Europe that it's like a little bit more nuanced, but so I would say the levels of patriarchy, I think, are actually heightened as much as there's been like great movements to try to lessen that. I think there's been this like blowback where it's even worse, which is heartbreaking to me. Because it then makes those of us who are like fighting patriarchy have to get louder and, maybe more annoying, where people are like, somebody asked, like, are you a feminist? And I was like, yes.
What kind of question?
Are these really, are you not? Like, do you believe in education? Do you believe in the right to vote? Like, really? I'm a little scared of like how significant that pendulum is swinging of like less patriarchy and then the like it's just so extreme, and it's really worrying to me that we're back there. So
definitely it is. And I feel like you're saying, it just gets more and more extreme as people like try to get further and further away from I don't know what people are calling like woke culture and like all these different things. People go to this other extreme of being it just so misogynistic and so sexist, and it's that idea that like in my mind you would think at this point anyone could easily call themselves a feminist. They could say, yes, I am for like equal rights of the sexes. That is something that people should be able to all agree on, and yet that's still contentious.
Definitely.
Which is also affirming to me of like why we still need feminism today, even though it feels almost cliche to be like fight the patriarchy or be like, we're feminists. And it's like, yes, because we still need this, unfortunately.
Definitely.
I was editing one of our videos about Betty Friedan that we're putting out in a couple weeks, and she was like a pioneer in feminism, and thinking about how when her book came out, she like opened so many women's eyes and so many people's eyes to the fight for feminism, and that was like, what, 50 years ago, and it's still going, is frustrating.
Absolutely. And the question for me is basically like, what are we doing wrong where we're pushing everybody into the extremes? Like, it is very hard to hang out in no man's land, no woman's land, and basically like be quite even keeled about your said beliefs. But there is like more and more, I feel like week over week, the heightened, culture war is just like insane to me. And I think there are key things to look at, and one of them for me is patriarchy and misogyny, and for me it's like going up super, super high and you go like, wow, this is a beast, and where do you want to interact with it, and where do you want to just like ignore them and do your thing over here? And what is the challenge to those of us who are challenging the norm? Are we doing it right? Are we causing the pendulum to swing harder in the other direction? Like, what is the way forward today in this culture war, for lack of better term? But it is so disheartening to me. Like when I was reading these articles about what's happening in the Southern Baptist movement, I was like, it's just so devastating. It's so devastating across the board.
And I feel like more and more people are so much more willing to align themselves with ideology that 10 years ago they never would have been able to stand upon, because they would lose all of their women. Supporters, right? Like, it would just be like, okay, he's crazy, or they're crazy, or whoever. And now it seems like power is so much more easily attainable in that on those extreme edges of thought.
Right. And then why aren't women supporters being loud about not following? Is one of my questions. Like, what is happening for the life of women where they're okay with these said leaders, who I won't say their names because maybe this podcast will get taken down, but I really want to spell them out. But why are women okay with it? I think is a positive question. What would you guys say to that? I'm not gonna interview you, but like, why are women okay with that in your opinion?
I don't know. I mean, like, Carolyn, have you read Carolyn Custis James's book Half the Church?
No, I haven't.
It's a play on words of the book Half the Sky, which is a famous feminist book, and it talks about how women are half the church, and actually, like I said earlier, 2/3 of the church, really. In most church and parachurch organizations, women outnumber men 2-1. And it actually never ceases to surprise me how many women will put up with, okay, you're not a leader, you can't, you shouldn't, don't do, whatever, and kind of resign themselves to these sort of traditional norms that we've come accustomed to. I wonder if there's a sense of safety in being able to just sit back and focus on your family and let a male lead the home. And I think oftentimes in the church, women who are married, who kind of like exist within the purest patriarchal ideal, they kind of are sitting in one of the best positions that you can sit in within the church and even within society as women can go. And so it's comfortable, maybe? I don't know. And then typically people who aren't in that married relationship, singles, older women who maybe are widowed, they divorced, just kind of are so marginalized and pushed to the edges that their voice doesn't carry the same weight. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's linked to some of that like marriage privilege that is very prevalent in the church, and actually also in like at least American government.
Just in society in general,
there is a huge, I was listening to a podcast talking about how one of the current candidates for the GOP nomination here in the U.S. is, which listeners, Kelly is actually in Canada. She is internationally coming to us here to one being. But in the U.S., one of the senators that's running in the GOP race, he's actually from my home state, South Carolina. He is one of the only people who has run for president of the United States as an unmarried man. I think there's even a sense of privilege in that.
Definitely.
realm where the idea of electing someone to the leadership of our nation who is single is like unheard of. Like absolutely, like for some reason we have, which I think there's actually, I could point to a lot of reasons, but we have a high value for people that are married. And we see that in the way that like our housing market works. We see that in the way that our tax system works, like all sorts of things, and in the way that the church works.
Yeah.
But I also think some of it comes down to plain old indoctrination. Like, I think that people are raised, and these women are raised with the idea that this is the only option for them. Therefore, they carry along with it because they see it as the highest that they can climb is to aspire to be a housewife or to aspire to have a lower position within the church, that because that's all that they're really have ever been told they're allowed to do. Like, the idea of going beyond that has not been accessible to them.
Well, and there is status ascribed to those like lower positions of power that women are able to reach, right? Like, even though it's not as powerful or as esteemed, I guess, in a church environment, like a married pastor's wife has so much more status points in terms of her like value than a single woman in leadership. And so I think that there's like a classist sort of subconscious ascribing of status, basically, that motivates women to want these sort of more traditional stereotypical positions, possibly.
What's so fascinating to me is how relatively recent that move is on that view of, I would say, family more than marriage being the ideal Christian view. And I think in America, I mean, to say church and state is divided is just total BS. Like, so much of the church is the state and vice versa, more than so many other countries. But that is so new. And if you like flip through the texts of history of saints, like it was completely reversed.
To
that
be single.
Structure.
So many women hated marriage.
so many women tried to stay single and tried to stay without children. Like, when you really read between the lines, there was such an ideal to being like basically solo. In the church, you know, you were like more, even missionaries and like, you know, 200 years ago, like this phenomena is so new, but yet we believe it so deeply. And so one of the questions for me I would like love to get to the bottom of is like, what really happened in this like totally non-biblical version of family? And then how has it become so elevated? And then how are we shaming everybody on the fringes of that? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it's so sad for me. Who is punished is women. Because they then aren't rising to levels of any kind of leadership in the church or in society because they can't, because it's unbiblical. And the tenets of that, in my opinion, run so deep within and outside of the church as well. So I mean, I think I'm curious to see where the next 10 years are going to go, but I don't think it's going to be good.
I do hope, though, that it's a swing, you know, like we had Savannah Ray Carreno on our podcast, I don't know, a year ago, 6 months ago?
Earlier this season.
And she has her MDiv. She did go through the process of being ordained and has a lot of similar experiences to you. One of the things that I remember that she said when we had her on is throughout history, we see surges like this of polarity. And almost always it does result in progress towards the end. But it might get rough for a little while. Like, we might have a rough time for the next 10 years or so. Hopefully not that long. But I think at the end of the day, like, looking back at history and how society moves forward, it's sort of like we make progress and then we take several steps back and then we, move forward again. So I overall hope, based on a historical perspective, that we do have, greener pastures ahead of us. But I think at least currently it's going to take a lot of time to resolve the culture wars that you're describing. And I don't know.
What I'm hearing is an invitation back to the bra burning days when feminism was at its, I don't know, I think it's all the glory days.
In the golden days, yeah.
The golden days when it was like, well, they're not listening, so burn the bras with fire. Jokes. But, you know, the idea that most people still have of feminism, of like, oh, you're just angry and you hate men. I'm like, no. We're saying stop punishing us for trying to show up. Yeah. That's what we're saying.
That's good.
Well, and the assumption that we often get like on social media is that we are all single because we are feminists, even though Kelly and Kellyanne are very married.
Super married. Extra married.
Like they could maybe point at me as angry single feminists, but like we have majority married people here hosting our podcast and we're still angry feminists. So I think that that's interesting. And Kelly Rose, to swap over back to you. I'm curious, as we talk about like polarity and like people going from one extreme to another, and like I think that one of the fears that I tend to have is that we're becoming too insular and insulated within our views. So even like on our side of things, on woman being, like I listen to things that we say on the podcast and I worry that we're speaking our own language of feminism that isn't even accessible to somebody who is anti-feminist or someone who's even like moderately questioning feminism or things like that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we see people who are hyper conservative or misogynistic, and it's like they're in their own bubble. One thing that I think is fascinating about your quote unquote side hustle of Hello Yello is that you're trying to like bridge gaps. It feels like you're trying to get people to have conversations. Yeah. And I'm curious to hear more from you. Like, what does it look like to try to talk to each other again and not be so insulated?
It's such a need. I can't remember the name of the book, but I will get it to you guys. But it's about talking to strangers. And the case that the author, and he's a PhD and brilliant person, makes is basically like when you talk to strangers, something about you changes. And I think Hello Yello is like such a perfect idea. It was like a group idea. I'm just bringing it to life of a very like low stakes environment where you can actually just like basically learn the action of like looking up and turning toward the person beside you and asking them a very simple question, like, where were you born? Yeah. I mean, these are like such low stake questions, but I think we have become so individualistic and then like with massive blinders up, not wanting to talk to the people around us, that actually I think we do need more invitations to just like look around and be nice and ask like very superfluous questions that, you know, don't get to the core of who somebody is, but at least you learn something like, oh, I met this person from Lithuania and this is what they grew up eating. Like actually something about your worldview changes when you meet other people. I also think that we live in an era where people so don't want that. Like you just said, like, I think we so desperately want to like stay in our own bubble with our own ideals. And I've even experienced this, that it's like harder to be around people who think really different now than it was even 2 years ago, where I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't at all. Like, I don't want to be around that, you know, whatever that is. But I actually think we need to be around people that think different and act different and have different jobs and different beliefs and different experiences and look for those opportunities because they are not around. Like, you know, you're in your own car, to your own office, to your own world, to your own computer. You can actually like stay out of other people's viewfinder really easily. Way too easy. And so the invitation for Hello Yello is like, get out there, be nice, talk to those around you. And be uncomfortable. I think we live in a society that is like so geared to like protecting each other from our anxiety that I'm like, that anxiety is just, sorry, like disclaimer, I completely believe in mental health and how desperate anxiety can be for people. But there's also a minor anxiety that we should feel that like helps us grow. And so if you're always avoiding anxiety, you're actually never growing. And I think there's an anxiety in talking to strangers, but I would say like lean in, you'll get through it. Talk to them, you'll grow. And through that growth, I can't wait to see who you become. So a little bit of tough love there for today.
That's really interesting because some of what you just said reminds me of a conversation I actually had with my husband this morning about a friend of his that he's recently reconnected with from high school. So like we're talking like 10 years since they last really connected. one friend has kind of leaned in one direction politically and culturally, and Ross has definitely leaned in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And they've been sending articles, and, it's kind of just been this like back and forth debate. I'm sure many people can relate to that. One of the things that Ross was lamenting with me this morning is that despite many efforts on his part to try and bring up personal things that aren't related to any of this like bigger worldview kind of stuff, this friend hasn't like taken the bait. So like Ross has been trying to say like, oh, let's talk about workouts. That's a common interest we have. Or let's talk about, like family or whatever. This other person just isn't really willing to engage with him as a human and as a friend. And I think that there is a really valuable piece to being able to see people as people and to care about them and their lives outside of their viewpoints.
Definitely.
That is really beautiful and really, really hard. But I've been reflecting on this a lot, especially with like the people I work with and friends that I have, and with reconnecting with older friends and kind of realizing and learning, I think, how important it is to just care about people as people.
It's so hard. I've actually recently started calling people little creatures because it helps me be like, oh, we're just little creatures trying to like do our best. It actually helps me have so much more compassion. And then also like remembering through some of the challenges that I've been facing in the last few months, like we're all fighting a great battle and we're just not like communicating to each other about what we're facing. But then I would completely agree with you, Kelly, that we have like zero ability to see the other person as just a person. It's just like wrapped up in so many like beliefs and, do you believe in vaccinations? And, who are you going to vote for? Like it's all these like massive dramatic topics. And I think we've really lost the art of friendship of who are you? How are you? I don't really care about what you believe, but can we still relate to one another? And honestly, I think what will it take for society to come back to a place where we actually just like enjoy each other?
Yeah.
Can't wait for it.
Actually, I recently went back home to Oklahoma and had a chat with my childhood best friend's parents. And they were talking about essentially this. It's like, how do we navigate in this hyper tense time about literally everything? And she, the mom straight up was just like, yeah, when people ask me who I vote for, I just straight up tell them, I really like being your friend and I don't want to talk about it because I feel like this will impact our friendship.
Wow.
And I actually care about you. And like, that is like her line that she goes to and is like, I'm just going to leave that there and let you know, I really care about you. I don't want anything like this to impact our friendship. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I was like, like it stuck out to me because I haven't heard anything like that. And I've been kind of chewing on it ever since. I'm like,
Well, and that's so anti-culture to like the social media environment.
Yeah.
Like, like there's something about like taking a stance and saying something quippy that people are going to resonate with and share. And,
definitely
when it comes to the context of our happiness and the happiness of the people around us, like maybe, checking in on your neighbor and making sure that, they got their cat home from the vet and as well is a little bit more important to our small human world than like who they voted for.
Yeah.
I think it's hard because I can see a swing in a different direction in this conversation of like, well, why don't we just all get along and never talk about anything hard? Which I don't think is what we want.
No.
It's like, okay, how do we navigate the tension of recognizing people with human dignity and respect and connecting with them despite differences, but also pushing towards progress that we think is gonna be good for the well-being of all, Like I've had conversations, especially considering that it is currently Pride Month, with like friends who are in the LGBTQ plus community. And it's like, I know people who are like, I'm not going to associate with someone who doesn't affirm my identity. And I'm like, I think that is valid. Like you have experienced so much trauma being someone who is gay in this world that doesn't accept you for who you are. And then I have other friends who are like, well, I have friends who are not affirming, but like, I hope that like I can be a gay person that they eventually like that sort of like helps change their mind, you know? And I think that's hard because then they're opening themselves up to be sort of re-traumatized potentially and to be exposing themselves to people who don't affirm their identity. And I think that's a fairly extreme example. But like, it's hard because what is the right thing to do there, you know? I think maybe it's just there's not one right thing to do. Right. It's a bit more nuanced.
Well, and I would hope that, like, you know, the other 99 episodes that we've recorded are proof of the fact that as a woman being, we do really deeply care about digging into topics that are a little taboo or a little controversial or a little complicated, you know? Like, I think that's a high value for all of us. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's important to remember the person-to-person relationship piece of it is a lot more complicated than, like, the conversations piece of it, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. How do you find the humanity in people, I think is really like the core question.
And have we lost the humanity in ourselves? Like, I think due to social media and technology, actually our views are, they require so much of us. Like, we define ourselves by our views, you know, feminist, you know, I believe in education. I believe in all these things. This is who you should vote for. I'm this side of this argument. Mm-hmm. But actually, I would ask, like, have we given our views way too much weight in our identity that we actually have, like, nothing to relate on anymore as just, like, average people going about our little lives? Like, we have, it's this, like, cacophony of everybody's, like, sometimes I'm like, just stupid opinions. Like, can you all shut up? That's, like, way too dramatic. But, like, social media is this, like, hothouse of people's opinions, and I go, like, actually, do we know ourselves? Do we know each other as little people,
little creatures?
Little creatures.
We're all little babies at the end of the day.
Yeah,
looking for, you know,
like little babies trying our best, and I think, like, I have kind of lost the way on relating to one another as just people.
Yeah.
So, and I completely agree that there has to be this land of, like, honoring each other's opinions, but they've gotten so loud where I go, like, can we turn down the volume of those and turn up the volume on just who we are and who we're trying to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And therein lies kind of the issue is that the volume is up on the dissent. The volume is not up on the places that we can find common ground, you know, and
I completely agree.
Especially in areas of, should women have education and should they vote? And should we, you know, like, should everyone, you know, be able to get through this world and not, like, starve? You know, like, I think there are things that on both sides of all aisles, you know, we actually can come together and agree on, or at least, like, find common ground on. And so it's, I think the challenge with social media and the current culture war is it's really more about elevating things that we absolutely could never agree on.
Yes.
As opposed to figuring out ways that we can find common ground for the purpose of progress, right?
Yes.
Because progress doesn't happen when two sides are on opposite ends. It happens when two sides come together and figure out a way to pave the way, you know? And that's how we grow as a society. I would love to change gears a little bit here and talk a little bit more about Bold. You shared a little bit about why you decided to start this podcast. Would you share some more? I would just love to know, like, what does a bold woman mean to you?
I thought I would have a clearer answer to this, honestly. I think boldness is purposefully very vague. But I would say the recurring theme that I've seen and what boldness means to me is this ability to, I would say, radically accept reality, that it's people that say, like, this is who I am and these are my, you know, certain forever wounds, or this is the life I've lived. And based on that reality, this is how I choose to act and what I take ownership for. So it's this, like, beautiful journey of acceptance. Because I think we can deny a lot of that and live for what should be or could be or what we wish was versus, like, truly what is. That's been the story of boldness in my own life. I would say it's been like a 5-year process of radical acceptance of, like, this is who I am. And once you radically accept who you are, I think you are therefore bold. I don't think boldness means this, like, you know, although I love the idea of bra burning, you know, loud, angry type of woman. It's this woman who accepts who she is in her entirety.
So, Kelly Rose, I would love to know when your masterclass is coming out, because I would like to take it, please. Please and thank you.
For 2024, and I'll send the link once I've written it.
Excellent.
Right, stay
thank
tuned,
you so
people.
much. Everyone stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned.
That's a really beautiful illustration of boldness in a way that I think is counter to the common definition. I think that bold is something that can be pinned as more quote unquote masculine at times, like the idea of being, loud and being at the forefront and attention grabbing.
Yes.
And then when you think of the feminine side, quote unquote, of bold, it becomes more like pushy or too loud, or I think there's all these stereotypes that come along with it, and your definition feels a lot more like I don't know how to, like, more gentle. Like, it feels like you're coming at it with boldness is actually this acceptance and this wholeness, and the idea that a woman would walk through life and choose to recognize her wholeness is quite bold and quite
Very, very
countercultural.
Absolutely. And then I think there's a byproduct that can be more outward of people that are like, this is who I am and I'm not ashamed of it. But then I think there can be this just like inward confidence that you like have what it takes to just keep going. Because I think a lot of us face like 10 to 20 to 30 years of this like quiet determination. And for me, that's like the most epic boldness, when somebody just like putting in the work and taking one more step. I think the danger in sometimes women's stories is we hear the like finished product of the like, Melinda Gates, who is phenomenal, but you hear this like end story of her and all of her like amazing things she's ever done, but you're not necessarily hearing the like decades of, kind of quiet determination. To me, that's bold. That story within. So.
Yeah. And that's really valuable when we live in such a like Instagram highlights society where you see those successes, but you don't see that grind that led towards the successes. And or people who I don't remember who it was, but I saw an interview with an actor who was being described as like an overnight success. And they were like, I've actually been acting for 10 plus years. And I just finally had something that became more widespread as a quote unquote success. But like, this is not overnight. This is a decade of work that I've put into this. And so I'm curious, in light of that, like what kind of stories you've heard from the women you've interviewed on your podcast that have particularly touched you, or maybe some things that you've learned from the women that you've had the privilege of interviewing.
I feel so honored to get to, as you guys know, like get time from people and then be able to probe their stories. So each one for me has just been like, once I finished the interview, I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is so rich. I like want to spend my whole life doing this. I would say the like common theme that I think has changed me already is women who can express the like tension points in their life of becoming. As maybe cheesy as that sounds, I think they've all done an amazing job of being like, even this last episode I just released, Vanessa Fernandez was her name. She basically talks about the messy middle and like how brutal it is to be like in between two phases of who you are, essentially. And so it's this kind of like really, I would say quite intimate vulnerability, but with respect, that women talk about the like nitty gritty of becoming who everybody thinks they are today. And I think those are the stories, like those are the parts of like I just said earlier, like I don't want to hear the like end. I run a Fortune 500 and everything's great. I want to hear like, talk to me about the burnout, talk to me about the divorce, talk to me about your community turning your back on you. And not because I have a proclivity for negativity, but because I want to actually hear the like the honesty of what it takes to become whoever you are. And then what it really looks like for these women to be who they are. And if that's, a CNN political analyst who's like really okay challenging the status quo, like I want to hear all of that. And if that's a solo mom learning how to like balance the all of the things in life, like let's hear about that, and give women basically like more versions of stories than kind of, I still think we have very singular narratives. So I feel like I've felt seen and validated for my own journey. That'd probably be the biggest thing for me in Bold, is that I'm like, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
We all go through this in just like very different ways. And I think I can often feel like quite alone in my journey. And so by getting to hear other women's stories, you actually feel very seen and like, oh, we're in this together. This is amazing.
That's beautiful. And I think, yeah, we can relate in the sense of it is such a privilege just to get to take a little bit of time from someone and pick their brains and like learn more from these amazing people. And I think the fact that you're exposing that process is so valuable. Yeah. And it's something that is always encouraging to me when I get to hear that that behind the scenes, you know, and get to recognize like, oh, this is like, you're not necessarily falling behind.
Totally.
Which it can be easy to feel that way.
And that it is a process. Like, I think that's the whole thing, is we're sold this kind of like consumerism version of becoming who we are, that like it's easy and you kind of can like buy it off the shelf. But actually getting to hear this, again, this last episode, Vanessa basically talked about like the process of actually finding her voice after, and I don't mean like finding your voice in a like, then I spoke to power. It was like she actually had to like relearn how to talk with power after living in a context that like made her small. And so she said like my voice got deeper and my coach like would help me yell. And it's like that is such an incredible process, and one you like don't hear many women talking about. So it's that process for me that I've actually like, it helps you realize your life is a process and actually it's just going to keep going versus like ever arriving at the like ideal state.
I like the way you're describing this process, because to me, it's really the articulation of feminine wholeness. I feel like I'll speak to my own experience. Me as a woman, I have, grew up as a secretly raging feminist, not so secretly, and no one like fed that to me. It was just, I came out of the womb and here I was. And through going to a ministry school and a lot of experiences in my teenage years, it was like that was like pounded out of me. And that process of coming out of those really hard experiences and reconnecting with the things like you're saying, my voice, going through therapy, because dear God, I was fucked up. Still am a little bit, but that's okay. Falling in love with my forever wounds, like falling in love with who I am and not trying to mold myself, mold my feelings or my opinions into something that's tolerable for you, the person sitting across from me, to me is the practical application of feminine wholeness. So trying to just integrate who you are and be at peace. I feel like you keep saying that throughout this process or throughout this interview of like, what does it actually look like to be at peace with who you are today? And that is where your power is. That is where your voice is. That is where your impact is. And I mean, not glorifying the grind, but like putting in that steady, consistent work, because that is really how you will advocate for yourself.
Well said.
And I think there's like the outward representation of that inward acceptance is where the stories get told, right? We don't want to just go kicking down doors out of insecurity, right? We want to kick down doors based on like a true assuredness in who we are and what the world needs. And that's like where true impact comes from. And I think that balance is hard to find.
Yeah. I mean, is the balance even real?
Is there balance?
Is balance a thing? Like anytime I talk to any mom, I'm like, there's no someone stop talking to this poor woman about being balanced. Like, go sit down because you don't know.
Like, the work-life balance question, I think I've asked this question before, and I understand why people ask it, but I think I'm so tired of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
it's not real. I sell my time to you to fund my lifestyle. I give you my emotional, mental, and physical energy to live. That is not balance. Like, that's not real.
I mean, I think once we ask people to balance their lives, I just think it's like a full-time job being balanced as well. So that's my experience, is like once we really demand that of me, I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for all that
totally.
balance.
No.
Totally.
Wow, I don't have time for that.
I don't have time to be balanced, right?
Yeah.
I remember we had a pre-interview with a guest who we actually never ended up having on, but she's an incredible local leader in the community. And we asked her about her work-life balance, and she told us, she's like, I think it's bullshit. Not a thing.
Interesting.
She's like, you work when you work and you live when you live. And and then later on, we found out like, oh, she actually does have like boundaries, because like in trying to set up recording times with her, she was like, well, no, I don't do that on Saturdays. And well, no, I have like family time here. And so I think that the question maybe should be less about work-life balance and more about like healthy boundaries for yourself and your family and your life. Because she definitely had a way of like managing like burnout, right? Like in her own life and for her kids and for her family. And I think all for great, good reasons, and all done really well for her life. But I remember for a long time, I thought like she was just bullshitting us the whole time. I'm like, she has work-life balance. Look at all these boundaries, you know? And it's like, but yeah, the idea that something could be like perfectly situated so that you spend the perfect amount of time here and over here and whatever. It's like, I've never had kids, but anything I can understand about being a mother is that there are all sorts of things that happen that are outside of your control all the time. And you just have to flow.
Also, like, what part of life is not work? I think that's like my main question.
That's a great question.
It's like life is hard. Like relationships are hard. Having like full friendships, that's work. Like all of these things require work. I would say like, what is work rest? How do you manage work rest tension would be my way of completely like shortcutting that conversation, because life is work.
Definitely.
And what's wrong with that? I would ask people like, what life are you trying to protect from work? So and vice versa. But
yeah, that's a great way to look at it too.
I like lots of diversity in what my work looks like, but none of it is just like life, like life. So except for maybe holidays and the beach, but.
Yeah, I think about that too. When we tell people about the podcast, they're always like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it's all work that like we care deeply about. And that is so self-fulfilling. It's just because it's passion doesn't make it not work.
Not work. Yeah. I mean, I just think we've like totally glamorized the work-life balance conversation and thought like work is one thing. And then like when you come over to the life, it's like always, you know, a hot bubble bath with a glass of red wine. And that's just like, I don't know what you guys mean by life, but that's not what my life is like.
No. And I mean, to go on the another side of that, outside of like a side hustle like Woman Being or Bold, there's also the work of just living. Like we talked about this a lot in our episode on king keeping, which is the unpaid work that so many women are then saddled with doing, which is maintaining a home, making sure the laundry gets done, making sure that you know when the next family gathering is happening, making sure that all the meals are that you're eating throughout the week, like making sure that all these things are happening either as a single person or in a married couple. It typically is falling on the woman to organize all of those things. And so on top of all that, there's this other unpaid work that is also part of just living life, like that you have to get those things done. You have to make sure that you paid all of the bills. Like you have to make sure that you've, you know, that you're washing your sheets. Like, you know, like there's so many little things that they build up, and that is all work as well. And like that is part of how you maintain life. So
yeah,
that's what we've lost when we left the land is rest.
Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Exactly.
When you're on the
very
land,
out of sync.
So out of sync, honestly. And electricity. I mean, all these things have created a work-life shit show.
Yeah, it creates this illusion of like a much higher capacity for work than maybe people should have.
Yeah.
This is coming from someone, I am a workaholic for sure. Like, and I might say that, but I'm not going to practice what I preach right now.
Yeah. At least we're honest. This is great. I'm Kelly. I'm probably a workaholic too. So
yeah. Well, this has been such a fun conversation with you, Kelly Rose. And is that what we decided, Kelly Rose, not Kelly? to differentiate.
Right?
Well, I don't know.
I didn't
you said Kelly
Lamb
Lamb in the beginning, so I don't know.
Someone said Kelly Rose at some point, and I was like, I like that. I'm going to use it. So I don't know.
There was a day where I realized that Rose is not just a flower, but a verb. And I then readopted my middle name.
Okay.
Kelly Rose. I love that.
Whoa. I literally sat there being like, oh my goodness, verb.
That's incredible.
And I stood up and sat down a whole bunch of times. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to add Kelly. I'm going to add Rose back into my name everywhere I go. So
yeah, love it.
I love that.
Incredible. So the question we ask at the end of our episodes with all of our guests is open to interpretation. I'm sure you've heard it before, but I would love to know from your perspective, what does the phrase woman being mean to you?
I would say up until probably the last few years, I would define my own life as woman doing, that I was just like so caught up in the doing of life. But more recently, have been so committed to what it means to be. And I would say for myself, that means like extreme honesty about life around me and me, honesty toward myself, living alive. And that sounds super cheesy, but I actually think we can like choose to numb ourselves and avoid a lot of pain. What does it look like to be fully alive? So honest, alive. And then I would say present, that so much of my life is conditioned to like make me go in a million directions about 100 different things all at the same time. And for me, being means present. And so I think all of those things together mean woman being to me. And I think once you can be, I think you're actually like you. I think it's this like wonderful, weird, symbiotic relationship that like you have to work hard to be, but once you can be, you're like actually fully you. And I think that takes a lot of time, but I'm here for it. So maybe a little bit of a weird answer, but I love your guys' name, and I love the invitation for what it looks like to be.
Oh, and I love your interpretation.
Yeah, I think it's very relevant.
Weird interpretation?
No, it's so good. Honestly, it's so fun because everyone has such a different answer, and it always sits differently.
Interesting.
Like in the most beautiful way, because it's like we together are woman being in all of its forms and all of its manifestations.
Definitely.
And so it's kind of that old thing of like you as a woman don't have to be my competition because you're my inspiration. Like, because you're doing it, I am capable. And like us together helps make what women can be.
I love it.
Well, yeah. And I think there's a little piece in what you said there where like woman being then is just as worthy as woman being now, is just as worthy as woman being someday, you know? And like we're all on this journey and this process of becoming who we are, or becoming more attuned to who we are. And all of those stages of the process are a beautiful, incredible part of it, you know? So, which is a good reminder for me as an achievement-focused doer.
Yeah, no, same. I hear you there.
So hit us up with some resources. Please plug your own stuff, but also are there any books or podcasts or documentaries or things that you think readers and listeners
readers of our audio podcast,
you know, all the people that are reading the transcript instead of listening would be interested in?
Amazing. So I would say some of my own stuff. You can go to my website, www.boldpodcast.co, for all of my podcast updates. Hello Yello, I think, is an amazing initiative to follow along on from any city. My plan is to go global. Why just Vancouver, right?
Yeah, totally.
So that's www.helloyello.club. Same thing on Instagram at Hello Yello Club. So those would be the two main places to follow along on the fun side hustles. As far as books, I would say one of the most transformational books for me was Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Estes. Phenomenal book about women finding their intuition. That one was incredible. Give that a read. Two other book recommendations. You guys want them?
Yes, please.
Okay, amazing. One I found really transformative. It's called Motherhood, Is It For Me? Your Step-by-Step Guide to Clarity. It's by two psychologists named Anne David and Denise Carolina, and a phenomenal journey of asking hard questions around motherhood. They claim every woman should go through this 12-week course. It's incredibly transformative on like how to make decisions and where your views around motherhood come from. So would recommend that to anybody listening. And then based on this conversation, I would say an amazing book would be The Making of Biblical Womanhood by Beth Barr. Phenomenal take on where women belong in the church for those who are interested. And one last movie recommendation, I would say the movie Mary Magdalene. Phenomenal movie. Must watch. Was meant to be a like blockbuster, but got caught up in all of those, what was his name? The sex scandal guy.
Harvey Weinstein?
Yeah, he was the producer. And so they like pulled him as the producer, and it silently got released. I actually met the two scholars who did all the research behind it. And it like so few people know about this movie, but it's actually one of the like main reasons that I still have a faith is that movie.
Wow.
Yeah, so highly recommend it. I think it's only on YouTube right now. Sad it didn't make it to Blockbusters, but glad they made a stand.
Dang, Harvey Weinstein ruining even the good stuff.
Just screwing up more women's stories. Thank you, sir.
That seems like the antithesis of like the effect of the Me Too movement. But okay.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Well, Kelly, thank you for these recommendations. We will put those in the podcast description as we always do. It has been so incredible to chat with you and get to know you more. I find our conversations always just kind of go in whatever direction, and they're always just so fascinating and interesting. It's almost like having a fourth woman being on. It reminds me of just like the chats that we'll have off camera. So pleasure to have you. Everyone, please check out her podcast, Bold, and give her 5 stars and all of the things. And you could also do that for Woman Being. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else you can leave a review.
Yeah. I don't know if you can leave a review at any of the other places. But
I don't think so.
If you can,
please do.
Yeah.
That really helps us grow our audience and continue to thrive as a podcast. And so if you really appreciate the content that we're putting out, please support us in that way. And you can find us on social media. We're on Instagram and TikTok if you want to get some sound bites or get updates on the next episode coming out. And we're about to take a break this summer. It's been a fantastic season. It's been a little bit up and down. So thank you to all the listeners who have stayed with us through that. And wow, 100 episodes.
Yeah, happy 100.
Happy 100.
Incredible.
That's really something to celebrate. And for all the listeners who have been with us since episode 1, we made it.
Thank you.
Anyone like that?
I don't know.
If there is, please tell us.
To 100 episodes of Woman Being.
Well, maybe not 100, but they've been with us from the beginning. Wow. You're incredible. And wow, you've probably grown a lot with us because we've grown a lot.
Yeah.
So anyways, nostalgia at its end. Happy summer, everyone. Kelly, thanks again for being here, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks.